Welcome to the show, everyone. Dana and I sometimes we just start with giggling.
Because you don't see the prequel that we're hyping each other into a frenzy about stuff, and then we come on laughing.
You don't see the off-camera, off-script stuff. It's not even. I mean, our podcast isn't even scripted, so I shouldn't even say it's scripted.
True. Well, there you go.
Well, if you're here, welcome, Marvels. We've decided to call you Marvels, all of you, because they're what?
Marvelous. Yeah. It's like a dad joke thing. I'm to the age where it would be like something my dad would say. Yeah. That's okay.
I think it's funny.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Good.
We're going to go with it.
Cool.
We're going to go with it. We should make t-shirts.
Absolutely.
Because we could.
No, they call it merch. That. We'd have to have merch now. Oh. Yeah. We got to make some merch. Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Merchandise, merch. Yeah.
How come everything's shortened?
Because they don't have, it's all, I think it's really the texting age. It's easier. And then that becomes part of the lingo. Yeah. Yeah.
But then you can't have good grammar.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's bothersome. Okay. We're not here to talk about merch or grammar, but we are here to talk about the underappreciated.
Yeah. The under talked about, the under revered, the under marveled, if you will.
Yes.
System of proprioception.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of our audience is going to know about this because it's a thing with neurodiverse folks. I think especially with autistic folks. Some people will refer to it as like kinesthesia, maybe another word people have heard. And it really, so everybody knows about, hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, the touching, 5 basic senses. But we also have this pretty robust system in us. It's proprioceptive, and then also 2 giant lobes of our brain that helps us make sense of internal cues and external cues. But this one is a sense of where you are kind of in time and space and where your body is. Like, are you upside down? You right side up? Are you leaning? If you turn a corner too fast in your car, that sense of like being pulled, that's all proprioception kinds of things, right?
Yep. G's.
G's. Yeah. People usually become aware of that when they have issues, like if there's a problem with proprioception. So proprioception, you'll see in kids, like when they're developing normal proprioception where they're not good at stuff, like when a baby's first learning to walk, most kids don't go from crawling to walking effortlessly, right? It's just kind of, I always joke and say they look like they're drunk people when they're learning to walk. It's because that motor control isn't quite there, but also the sense of proprioception of where their body is in time and place and in space. And little kids, if you really look at them, proportionally their heads are huge, right? So they're kind of top heavy also. And as our bodies grow, our heads get smaller. But those are things that sort of happen flawlessly that we don't think about while we're developing, is that sense, unless there's an issue with it, right? So autistics we're incredibly known for, and we talk a lot about labelism on our show. We get pegged as uncoordinated or clumsy, or my favorite derogatory term that I got called a lot growing up is you're a spaz. That was one, which was like, oh, that was really mean, right? Bumping into stuff a lot. I still do this where I'll walk through a doorway and I don't judge it and I hit the door jamb. I love TikTok because people will show videos of that. And I'm like, there it is. There I am hitting the door jamb. Yeah.
No, you know what? Someone just sent me a TikTok. You know who you are too.
Yeah.
And it was like how ADHDers walk.
Oh.
And it's like she starts off like all glamorous and like she trips over this, she bumps into the door jamb. Her clothes gets like caught on like the handle of it's
yes.
hilarious.
Yes.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah. And so we know, though, there's quite a bit of evidence that shows that our proprioceptive systems there's some sort of disconnect somewhere, or we don't have quite the awareness of people that of allistics or neurotypical. So there's an explanation for it, right?
Yeah.
For me, which is also kind of common in neurodiverse folks, so some of us don't have binocular vision. Our eyes don't perfectly line up. So, and that's how you get depth perception, right? Judging where you are in time and space. So there's a lot of senses that feed into this, that something's a little haywire. But yeah, I've lived in my house for almost 20 years, and obviously running into a door jam, it's not that I don't know where the door is. It's literally at that moment in time, my brain misjudges and I run into it. I have bruises all over my body at various points in time. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I wonder how I got that one. It's a really big bruise. And I'm like, where did I do that? Like, I don't even know where it came from. I probably hit my leg against something, and it's so common part of my experience I don't even pay attention anymore. But there's like evidence for it, right? So that sense of that can be an issue. We think of that more as how, and there's all kinds of sensors in your body, various parts of your body that can sense compression and movement that are like in your skin and your muscles. It's not just in your brain, that really give you input for that, right? Your vision has a huge part to do with that. Your inner ear, you have these three little, what are called semicircular canals in your ear, and they have fluid in them. And one is kind of vertical, one's horizontal, and then one's at a 90-degree angle. And so representing all three angles, that gives your brain a sense of when you're moving around, like where you are in time and space. It's a huge problem when people go into space, like astronauts have to learn to move around without that, because gravity doesn't let that fluid flow the way it does on Earth, right? So there's so much research on this, mostly through things like the space program. We've learned a ton about proprioception. And then more of it's not proprioception per se, we call it interoception. And I always remember this because proprioception, like out there in the world, intero is internal. And this is the not where you are upside down or not, but more like your internal drive states. I think we've talked about that in here. Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I have to use the restroom? Do I need to blow my nose? All that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
And neurodiverse folks can be very in tune to those things, can be over in tune to those things. But the thing is, like, if we're really interested in something and focusing on something, those will fade. So this is the proverbial, oh my God, I've been at my computer in a deep dive in a special interest or playing a video game, and I haven't eaten or gone to the bathroom for the entire day. And then you have them bring their attention to that, and they're like, oh my God, I feel like my bladder's going to explode, right? So there's a disconnect there, or more likely that our intensity of focus, if we're really focused on something, it just makes everything else fade into the background. Whereas someone that doesn't have that neural circuitry to super focus on something, that's going to like keep knocking at the door, like, hello, you need to go to the restroom. And so for a non-neurodiverse person, they're going to get that message. It's going to bang to the forefront. Whereas for neurodiverse folks, it doesn't necessarily, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is so proprioception, this idea of where am I in space and time, right? How am I oriented? This also has to do with, the pressure coming into your muscles, right? Like you and I both know we're seated because more pressure is coming in through the back of our legs. I know I'm leaning over because, the bottom of my arms have pressure coming in through them. So these are things that we take for granted, I think. And this idea of interoception, I mean, how often are you and I talking about self-awareness? And the need for self-awareness first in order to manage, right? Yeah. So for example, if you don't know you're hungry or you're not getting the cues that you're hungry, you're not actually going to manage that. You're right. You're not going to go get something to eat. And man, how often do I get the complaints from parents? Yeah. My kid says that they can't pay attention, but when they're doing something they're interested in, they won't even eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so this kind of
because they're motivated to do what they're doing and they're forgetting about the other things too.
Yeah, right. It's like, I'm highly interested. This is a passion of mine.
Yeah.
I've been trying to call like stims, like, or interests, like passions, right? They're individual passions for people, right?
Yeah.
But this is actually, and then so even in the sensory arena, we have also used the words hyper and hypo to describe something, right? So hyper, I have a lot of it, a lot more than a neurotypical individual. Hypo, I'm under. I don't get as much of it. So when you have kiddos that like to bump into things, run into things, be crushed by things, like with their choice when they're in control.
Yeah. Like a weighted blanket is,
right. Swimming, is a good example of like full body proprioception, right? You get equal pressure across the whole body when you're underwater, these types of things. How does this, I think the way to think about senses sometimes is it's the first way that you perceive your environment.
Yeah, as we're developing. Yeah.
And that's why, we're not verbal yet.
Yeah.
Right? So we are moving.
Yeah.
And how, sensory profiling, especially proprioception in my mind, is really something that needs to be looked at. I mean, if we don't look at that, we really miss a big way to create the right habitat for somebody.
Or even if it's just, this is a thing. It's totally normal for you, which takes the stigma and the shame out of it, right? When I learned about this, I was like, oh my God, this is why I've had so many orthopedic surgeries and hurt myself, that and EDS. But it was sort of like this sense of, okay, it's not, again, that I'm not trying hard enough or I'm not paying attention. I would get that. Oh, pay attention to what you're doing. And it usually is these larger movements. Not necessarily fine motor control, because fine motor control is a totally separate system in your brain, and it's more deliberate. Your focus is more on it. It's these gross motor movements like walking through a door where I hit the door jamb, right? It normalizes it for folks. It also, we use the word barriers a lot, and I actually really like that word because it kind of, the judgment of the connotation is out. It used to really frustrate me because I love playing various sports. I love playing softball and baseball. I sucked at hitting the ball. And a lot of that is because I just didn't have well enough proprioceptive awareness to do it kind of in real time. That not having binocular vision, it was very hard to isolate that ball. But it shouldn't mean you shouldn't enjoy that and love that. I still loved it. It was really after I was like, okay, I joined a softball league. And we were in the D League, which meant like the beginners and people that weren't very good. But I was fine with that because then everybody, if a ball came to you and you're like, oh my God, I want to catch this, but then you totally misjudge it. Everybody else is in the same boat, and they were lovingly like, oh, it's okay. You tried. Now that I have this, knowing what this thing is, it's like, aha, see, it's harder for me. It is much harder for me. And doing all those various things where you're getting in your car and you practically rip your face off because you haven't, given yourself enough room to get in there, like hit your nose. Autistic clients, neurodiverse folks that I work with, when I explain this to them, you could just see the light bulb slowly going on. They'll be like,
light bulb moment.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. And so being more kind on yourself about how it happens and, just, okay, that's just who I am. Doesn't mean you're spaz or you're uncoordinated or you're not paying attention, right?
Yeah. And don't get us wrong. Like, there are times when you might do something and hurt yourself by accident because you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
There are those moments, but
we're of course,
right? What we're saying is the base wiring.
Yeah. And you bring up an important issue too, which is sort of the hypo and hyper, because those are marginalizing words, but hypo, not being aware of it enough. And I can remember early in my own therapy, it was body-based therapy. I can still remember the session where my therapist was like, well, what are you feeling in your body? And I was genuinely confused, like, what is she asking me? I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, your body, how does it feel? I'm like, I'm sitting here. I guess it feels okay. And then she had to kind of like, do you
Break
feel
it
it in
down.
your stomach? Do you feel heaviness in your chest? And then I learned like the language of the body. But before that, zero. Didn't have the awareness and didn't have the verbiage to be able to describe it. Now I'm like too far the other way. I'm hyper aware of things in my body, and now I wish I could dial that back a little bit. But sometimes it can become almost like a distraction, hyper aware. So folks that like things like weighted blankets, and it's a little bit idiopathic. Like I love long, warm showers, and a lot of people's showers are like it's like someone hitting them with hot sparks, and they can't. So it has to be something that fits for you, something that really stimulates you all over the body and kind of calms your neural circuits. I think that's one of the reasons why you mentioned liking music. I've never met a neurodiverse person yet that doesn't love music, and it has to be the kind of music they like. But it does hit everything, right? It's not just hearing, it's like the affect related to it. And if you're like me and you love to sing along with it, it's a steamy quality to it. So those are the things that if you have that circuitry that can be over or under aroused, coping mechanisms to deal with it, if it's over aroused, are really good too. So if you're someone who isn't paying attention to or can't pay attention to something like I haven't eaten all day, or I'm dehydrated. And what does tend to happen then is all of a sudden you get to the end of the ladder and now you're overwhelmed because you're starving and you're, passing out because you're so dehydrated. I'm going all the way to the other end here. Sure. But that's oftentimes when people get really irritable, and then meltdown happens because all of a sudden all that rushes into your awareness all at once and you hadn't been able to pay attention to it before, right? So I'll work with clients about regular check-ins with themselves, whether they have to set a timer on their phone or their watch or something along those lines, just to take a second and say, am I breathing? Have I eaten? Do I need to eat? And really training or helping people learn their bodies and be in touch with it so that they can do that, knowing that they're not going to be as in touch as someone else. And that's just a normal part of our circuitry. Right.
Yeah. In order to, if we understand this about the way that we're wired, and that's not a choice.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just going to say, and we know that we might under or over kind of receive that information, let's just say, then we create systems and routines for our personal well-being that keep us regulated. Right.
Yeah.
The other place that I see this too, Dana, not just in like our basic, like hunger, thirst, sex, like drive, like these are all kind of parts of that. But it's also in emotional feelings.
Oh yeah.
So often, so many of my clients kind of squash or they're not even aware of their agitation until it reaches a certain threshold. And then that threshold is hit. And then all of a sudden now we look like we're, quote unquote, out of control. Or
like that meltdown.
Overreacting or whatever that is. A lot of times I find that many of my clients don't even know those cues until it's too late. Yeah,
it's too late. Exactly.
If you will.
Exactly.
And that's why, it's like, wow, they go from 0 to 60 quickly. It's like, that kind of stuff. And so in those situations, it's like, do we have a framework for check-ins on a regular basis? And do we have the symbols?
Yeah, the language.
To actually express, those internal feelings? Because I'll tell you, like, I can't tell you how many times now that, Apple Watches and Fitbits are, very popular. Just looking at someone's heart rate is such an interesting thing to me. Yeah. And I'm like, you're resting and sitting, but your heart rate's 130. Like, isn't that interesting? Like, like, let's just take a moment and think about what? And that client, that heart rate was just that basic biofeedback.
Yeah.
Taking the heart rate and then driving it, watching himself drive it down by either breathing. In his case, he needed to lay down, which was interesting because he couldn't do anything else to bring it down. But that's another area that I see, this that like interoception,
Yeah.
proprioception, the ways that the body is registering sensory
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
That's another area that I see cause conflict, suffering, and tension because it
Absolutely.
impacts
Yeah. Yeah.
relationships, or
Yeah.
impacts the way in which they're in their environments. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, when you say the being aware of even what your affect state is, being able to name it, but also that was also something I had to learn in therapy. It's not
Yeah.
that I wasn't feeling those feelings. It was to zero in on them and then be able to name them to another person. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is anger. And that came with focusing on my body first, like, oh, my stomach's in knots and describing that. And then, or I'm feeling this heaviness in my chest, it's sadness. And now, now I can sort of do that without thinking about it. But in hindsight, I had to learn that. I had to have my therapist help me focus on those things to name them. I don't think it didn't come intuitively. And I can think back as a kid, it was really, I would have either nothing or I'd be crying and then, get pegged with the you're too sensitive thing. Myself not even necessarily seeing all the things that led up to it. And now all of a sudden I'm on overwhelm, and that's like my only thing I have is to just start crying, right? For my parents, I'm sure it was like you said, 0 to 60, oh, you're too sensitive, but all this stuff was happening in the meantime. And now I can recognize the cues leading up to it, and then also be able to check in with the other person and say, am I okay? Can I tolerate this? Et cetera, knowing that basic neurology is even different. I don't love that I'm aging, because I like the wisdom that's coming with that. I'm not so much
Yes.
liking the body stuff that hurts and that kind of thing. I don't care about wrinkles, but the pain's an issue. But so in doing that, my students are getting younger and younger. So I'll have 20-somes coming straight from undergrad. It's so awesome because I have, not only do I know I have neurodiverse folks in my classes, they're declarative of it and say, I'm neurodiverse. Used to be I would only know because they get a disability accommodation for learning. But it's things like people will come into the room now and say, oh, these overhead fluorescent lights tend to wear on me over time. I know that about me. Can we turn them down? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I can think about like when I would be in class and I wouldn't be aware that they were bothering me until we were 3 hours into a class. And I'm like, why am I so spastic?
Right.
Why am I?
Right.
Oh, it's the lighting. I would say, sure, let's turn the lights down and see if my overall arousal comes down. So those kinds of things, I think with folks that are recognizing this earlier and it's more out there and we learn about more, and we can see a TikTok video about it, which is awesome because I didn't have any of that when I was growing up. They can, then that self-advocacy can come and needs can be met, right? And I'll always they'll say things like, is it okay with you if I eat in class? I'm like, yeah. Oh, not every professor lets that happen. And I'm like, well, A, that's really messed up. But B, you should be able to attend to your internal cues, especially if you're having them. Let's reinforce that. I mean, if you're, carving a turkey in my class, that'd be weird, right? But if you're just drinking something and eating something, whatever, those are all really good things to know about yourself so that you can meet your needs and you can do that, right?
Yeah.
And or if it's not avoidable, you learn then I need that recovery time, right? I was in my memories on Facebook, I like to look at them every morning, was many years ago, well, about 12 years ago now, we went to see Madonna in concert. It was like this lifelong dream. She didn't even go on till 11 o'clock, which is really stretching it for both of us. And then like 2-3 hours, we didn't get home till 2 a.m, all that loud music, all that, and it took like 3 days to recover. And this is before I knew I was autistic. And I was like, so that I do remember taking the next day off of work. I was smart enough to know that, but I was just thinking we'd get home late. But it took that long for my sensory system to kind of calm down again and reset and that kind of thing. So it's knowing what's there, being able to do something about it, awareness that we always talk about, but also that planning idea and knowing what your needs are for recovery time too. And myself and clients that I work with, there's a grieving process in that. And I think there is for any physical limitation. right? That you can't do, or if you do everything you want to do, you pay a bigger price than maybe your neurotypical friend. It isn't fair, but there's a loss of normal or neurotypical functioning. I think that I certainly went through that. And then it got to the point where I'm like, oh no, this is who I am, and it's good, and I can nurture myself, and I can set boundaries with people if things are overstimulating, that kind of thing. But those are higher order levels of learning, and it has to start with, oh yeah, I have proprioceptive issues. I'm not going to necessarily be aware of that. Right?
Yeah, like put that in, like, put that in the considerations, right? For when you're managing something that I work with my clients a lot on is it's not time management, it's energy management. So I don't want you to, think about managing your time, because if you're doing very, very difficult things and you do that all day, you'll be out for 2 weeks. Like I've got clients, that are out, one of my clients went to a wedding, which he really wanted to go to because it was for someone that he absolutely adores and loves. And he came back and he slept for 2 weeks.
Oh, God.
Like it was so overwhelming for his system. And I think, managing the sensory system takes a very, very large share of energy requirements. And so when it's an energy hungry system, resource hungry system, we really want to be, when it's that way, we want to be really mindful about, I always say, if you're going to leave your habitat, it better be worth it. What do you need? What do you need to leave to leave the Shire? Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just finished watching the Rings of Power. So of course
there
I'm
you go.
in my Lord of the Rings. But I think about, the hobbits, and they've got this beautiful place. They have everything self-contained. They, and then when they leave, it's like, ooh, this is like a
it's a lot.
Journey. But I feel like that too, habitats. You need to create we get this for plants, we get this for animals. We said this in the last episode. Why do we not afford this to humans? I'm not really
or
sure.
know that it's a thing, right? That it's I'm thinking of when you were mentioning for all of us. For all of us, I love finding analogies for folks that aren't neurodiverse to understand it. And I'm thinking of sight and sound and light and all this kind of stuff. They use this in hostage scenarios to kind of smoke out the hostage holders. They play loud music 24 hours. They put bright lights on so that people can't sleep very well. And that's like a version. They try to drive them into meltdown like that. But that would be what we had experienced just on a daily basis with those things. To give you an idea, so that would be, they would deliberately have to do that to drive a neurotypical into the same state that a lot of us get with in normal everyday life, right?
Yeah.
So something like traveling to a wedding, it's not just the wedding. I was just thinking the wedding ceremony, if it was near where you live, but you have to travel, all those changes.
You got to now live in a hotel room.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Everything.
Not your place. How about
not predictable. Oh, how about food, sound, sleeping, everything's different. Yeah.
Right. Your sheets, your pillows.
I take
you don't have your cat or your dog. You don't I mean, there's all these things that we got to contend for. Right.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, as you said that sensory attack, I rewatched Alias. You know that show?
Oh, okay. I've seen parts of it. Yeah.
Show?
Yeah.
Oh my, okay. So my husband and I used to watch this very religiously, and then we would get really upset because we thought that someone erased stuff off the DVR, but they didn't. And so the new episode wouldn't be recorded, and then we'd sit down to watch it and there would be no new episode. And it was like,
damn it.
You forgot to take off, Lost or whatever. What else was on the DVR at the time. I know I'm dating myself for all you young
But it's a good example of going from 0 to 60 because it was something very important to you that you were all ready for.
Yeah,
right?
It was all set up for it. But they're in it because she's a spy. So, she often gets caught. And but in it, there is a time where she is literally forced to think a certain way through sensory attacks.
Oh, okay.
And so it's so interesting, the sensory system on all of this to say, it's a very roundabout way of saying this, that the sensory system plays an incredible role in our regulation.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, our comfort, and, being in the world, but it's hidden.
Yeah.
We don't pay enough attention to it. And proprioception.
I would bet you.
No one thinks of it as a sense.
If you just go out on the street and ask someone if they know what proprioception is, I'd put money on the fact that 99 people out of 100 aren't going to have any idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, and if you do know, you're either an occupational therapist or you've received OT services.
Yeah, there you go. Or they know they know the idea of moving around, but not. I love that you said it, sir. It's almost like it can be a form of invisible disability.
Yeah.
The chairs we have where I teach are atrociously uncomfortable. And I can see people vying for the one or two like task chairs that are in the room for people that need it for like their backs. And I'm like, everybody should have one of those chairs to be able to get comfortable. That internal, I'm thinking of like, I got a new computer last week and I waited for a day that I knew I had nothing else going on and I had the bandwidth to transfer it over because it was literally like my headphone jack's on the other side. When I go to plug it in where it always was, I was like, oh, there it is. Damn it. It's like a load of something I can't do automatically in the background anymore. Right. Yeah. And that's what like traveling is like, or moving, or my wife just got a new car. Every time I get a new car, I'm like, I know it's going to be a month of hell because I don't know where anything is. I don't know how it works. My body hasn't learned it yet. It feels different. And now you're filling that bucket up every day until you get used to it and you can bring that level down. So you're right. It's invisible. The water filling the bucket until it overflows is invisible to the other person. And so it's really important work for us and neurotypical folks too. I work on this a lot in therapy.
Yes.
How do you know you have a bucket? How much water do you have in it? And what are things within your purview that you can lower the water line? Because a lot of things you can't. They're not under your control, right?
Yeah. My abnormal psych teacher in undergrad, who worked on like he was a psychopathology abnormal psych teacher, and he worked on like Dahmer's case. I mean, it's like it was such an interesting, it's so many life experiences. It made that class super interesting. But I'll never forget the one thing. His name was Vern, and the one thing that I'll never forget that he taught was he's like, it's the very unscientific bucket theory. This is what he would say to us. And even then, he would say, everyone has different size buckets, right? Everyone's bucket is a different size, but you have to know what size bucket you have.
And what fills your bucket.
And what fills your bucket and what takes water out of the bucket. But man, when that bucket fills, that's when things get real, right? Like that's how many times I've asked my clients this question. Okay, I want you to think about the size of your bucket. Okay, I want to think about your bucket. When you wake up in the morning, how full is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for many of my clients, there's already water in the bucket upon rising.
Because they haven't slept well or whatever. Exactly.
Or they've been anxious all night long because something's coming. So now my bucket's already full. And can we then kind of wonder, why do they look so irritated and agitated? And I say to people a lot, like, if irritation and agitation is a baseline state for you, there is something that we are not paying attention to. Like, we've got to pay attention to something. So, so the amount of resources it takes to know where your body is in space and time in order to then move it functionally throughout the world. Yeah. For many of us, doesn't put any water in our bucket. Yeah. But for many with proprioceptive challenges, because of the way that they're wired, not because of choices.
Right.
That is work.
Yeah.
So we got to be really mindful about the environmental controls and environmental exposures and demand placement and I call it demand dosing or titrations, like all of these things. So, yeah.
And the other label of rigidity, like I got you, you're in the airport and here, I got you a bottle of water. And for me, since I'm a super taster, if it's Aquafina, I'm like, it's not, I can taste the chlorine in it. So I could imagine as a kid, like you're like, oh, now I've got the water that I don't like. Those invisible things that once you learn how to know those things for you, and then you can put those in place. But a lot of time, oh, you're so rigid, you won't drink a different bottle of water.
Just water.
It's just water,
Dana.
Exactly.
It's bottled water.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so that sense of learning what's in the bucket for that individual person, it might not fill your bucket, but it might overflow the other person's. And all of us, regardless of your neurotype, have had really you can bleep it there, really crappy days, where things went bad at work and you didn't get to eat what you wanted, and now you're stuck in traffic, and then someone cuts you off, and you're normally a pretty docile driver, but you scream out the window, all of us have reached that state, like you're saying your professor was talking about. Imagine that on a daily basis, because that's what we deal with every day in terms of things that can accumulate and set us off.
Yeah, it's cumulative. So another way to look at this is it's cumulative. It's not usually the fact that your husband didn't take out the trash that day. It's, that's not the result of the blow up, right? That's and that's, that I just want to put out there on the record. That's just a hypothetical situation. But the other thing that I think is hilarious is that Dana single-handedly has taught me how to edit out curse words in our videos. So I just want to say thank you, Dana, for giving me the opportunity to really
out of necessity,
my editing muscles. Yeah, not editorial, but editing muscles, which I love because Dana will drop an S word. Oh,
we don't want the FCC getting after us.
No, and we're not talking about the should or the shame. We're talking about the other S word.
Well, and they say people that swear regularly are happier and smarter. IQ. So there you go. It's It's also like we talk about other proprioceptive things. There's things that can release that energy. Stimming is a physical, when it's something repetitive, that's draining the bucket, right? That's what we're doing in that situation.
It's regulatory.
Stimming
is regulatory. Please, like we did that OCD versus stimming episode. Please go back to that if you are confused about or don't fully understand the difference between an obsessive thing and a stim.
And I think
stimming is regulatory.
Yeah, and I think stimming, particularly for neurodiverse folks, is a thing because of proprioceptive issues. I think if we have proprioceptive systems that are overwired and easily to overwhelm, doesn't it make sense that doing something repetitive would be what calms it down, like rocking or drowning it out with sound or whatever that is? It's what you do with babies. You rock them when they're crying, and we're repetitive beings. Breathing, there's all that rhythm is a part of who we are. Nature's all about rhythm, and stimming is trying to bring that rhythm back somehow. I really do feel strongly about this. I think that's why it's repetitive and why that works that way, because it's having an effect on that proprioceptive system or even that interoceptive system that's bringing that water line back down. And if we take that away from folks or socially ostracize someone for it, now you've taken away the primary way to cope with that overwhelm. And then you wonder why people get more overwhelmed. Sort of silly.
Or aggressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh my God, they're aggressive. I'm like, well, what happens when you get backed into a corner and have no other options? I mean, like you kind of fight your way out of that situation.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. But sometimes that happens so much that they'll just fetal position in a corner, figuratively. And so that's not good either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And Dana, you had mentioned, you've done a lot of body work. Do you feel like the body work, I think you've made mention of that it's helped in the sense of having a framework for understanding, developing language for expressing it and understanding it. As someone that might be listening to this might be a self-diagnosed autistic as an adult, right?
Sure. Right.
Do you think body work if they're thinking about this, could be a potential place for exploration anyway, not saying to go do it.
Yeah, I think that it has to
Think
be with someone that does a modality that you can trust and you can jibe with, right? Mine was what's called neo-Reichian bodywork, or was based a bit in bioenergetics. Lowen was the founder of that. And it's really funny because it was all about energy regulation. It was a way to figure out to bring energy up. It was a way to figure out to bring energy down, but also to emote. So like I know for me, singing in the morning, and my wife is so sweet because I'll ride my bike in the basement and she can hear me singing through the floor. And I've told her it opens my throat. So that's something that I've learned. Like if my voice is really high on a particular day, I know I'm constricting here. It's like something I learned. And vocalizing, whether it's singing or screaming or crying or whatever it is, opens that back up, and then it doesn't feel tense. And then I feel grounded again, feel that regulated thing. So that really helped me understand my body. It gave me techniques for regulating various parts of my body, to pay attention to them. That interoception thing certainly came with that. But for me, that particular type of body work helped me work through traumas. We were able to access things that way. But it also gave me an absolute toolbox for how to deal with something that does get backed up, right? My car is my favorite place to scream, especially when I'm driving, because most of us have semi-tinted windows. And if you're moving, people don't know, they can't see you. And even if they see you screaming, they're probably just going to think you're crying or you're singing. No one can hear you in a car. It's awesome. I do some of my best screaming in the car. And that will open all that up. I have asthma, so my body sort of holds it and tenses up here, and doing that and vocalizing very much took my asthma threshold way down, because we know stress has an effect, can exacerbate asthma. So absolutely, I think if you can find something that works for you. For some people, massage body worker works. Other people hate that and want to do, expressive movement therapies are wonderful. Going to groups that literally just drum and make sound. You have to find things that you can do with your body that work for you, that give you that release and give you those tools. And there's so many different types of doing body therapy out there. And you have to find someone you trust. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, I know that wasn't a quick answer, but as we're talking about body and we're talking about self-awareness.
Yeah.
And we cover this a lot. It's a kind of a recurrent theme for us. Experience is the best teacher. So
yeah.
You do need to try different things in order to know, but you also need to understand your baseline.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes, people don't know their baseline. So for lots of different reasons, but
I never knew my baseline could be calm until I got into body work and went to a workshop and had some really intense experiences. And I was just like, everything looks different. What's going on with me? And it was just finally a baseline that I had brought lower. And I'm like, oh, it stopped all the noise for a while. There it is. So yeah, absolutely. Learning your baseline. You talk about your guy with the heartbeat and he had to lay down. Now that's a tool he has. And he wants to, because that's a high heart rate to have every day, all the time. It's wearing on your heart. So are there things you can do that can lower that and can help with that work for you?
Yeah. I know we've been trying to find different things, because laying down in the middle of class is not necessarily so great. Trying to figure out some even, progressive muscle relaxation, which, by the way, I really love, because there's an immediate difference of tension and relaxation as opposing feelings. And so for me, even like squeezing a hand and releasing the hand, or squeezing the chest and releasing the chest, like it's quiet, like you don't see it.
You can do that without anybody seeing it. You can do it in a chair, and you can do it anywhere.
That's you can do it in a chair. You can do it anywhere.
Do it anywhere.
So I feel like, Dr. Seuss. Anyway, okay, you marvels. Thank you for being with Dana and I, as Dana and I talk about these topics. And really, I hope you guys can feel how much Dana and I love doing this.
And please,
go.
Give us comments. Tell us things we're saying wrong or right, or that you'd like to hear, or just give us your 2 cents. We'd love to hear from you.
We would love to hear from you. And did this episode raise any awareness for you. You
Mhm.
know, did you know about proprioception?
Mhm.
Even just put that. Did you know about proprioception? Yes or no?
There you go.
That
There
would
you
be
go.
great for us to even like have a little survey or poll on that.
Yeah.
That would be great. But all right, Marvels, we will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.